Somewhere in the desert, beneath a sky white with heat and ambition, a kingdom is building a city that doesn't need to exist. Not yet, not here, not at this scale. But it is rising anyway. Steel and glass and concrete pushing up from sand that has never supported a metropolis, financed by oil wealth and political will, designed to prove that a nation can reimagine itself in a single generation. This is not an expansion. It is not organic growth. It is a wager. A multi-billion-dollar bet that spectacle can become civilization, that infrastructure can summon a population, and that a government can spend its way into a new future before the old one runs out. The city has a name. It has master plans, investment portfolios, and promotional videos that show families walking through parks that do not exist, along waterfronts carved from nothing, ice beneath towers that are still dust and rebar. It has been called visionary. It has been called reckless. What it has not yet been called is finished.
I'm standing at the edge of what will eventually be called a financial district. Behind me, there are cranes, dozens of them. But between those cranes, there is only empty land. Graded, surveyed, marked with stakes and fluorescent tape. The roads are here, the utilities are being buried, but there are no buildings, no people, just preparation for a population that has...
This is the anatomy of a megacity gamble. Not the kind that grows from a port or a river or a crossroads of trade. This is a city born from policy, a decision made in air-conditioned rooms by men who believe that if you build grandly enough, reality will have no choice but to follow. The logic is seductive. The kingdom needs to diversify. Oil will not last forever. Tourism, finance, technology, logistics. These are the industries of the future. And they require cities. Not the old capitals burdened with history and traffic and bureaucracy. They require new cities, clean cities, cities designed from nothing to be everything. So the government has allocated the land. It has drawn the borders. It has hired the architects and the engineers and the contractors. It has opened the investment roadshows and the sales galleries and the visa pathways. It has published the renderings. And now, in the desert, the construction has begun.
I'm inside one of the project sales centers now. The walls are covered with backlit images. Skyscrapers that curve like waves. There's a scale model in the center of the room, almost 6 meters long, showing a city of 2 million people. Everything is pristine, everything is possible. But when you ask when it will be completed, the answers become softer, projected, phased, dependent on market conditions.
The official budget is staggering. Estimates vary, but the total investment required to bring this vision to full completion is believed to exceed $200 billion. Some analysts place it higher, much higher, because building a city in a desert is not like building a city anywhere else. Every need must be artificially met. Water must be desalinated from the sea and pumped inland. Electricity must be generated at massive scale to power not just homes and offices, but the endless air conditioning required to make the climate survivable. Roads, sewage, fiber optics, and hospitals, schools, parks. All of it must be constructed before a single resident moves in. This is the paradox. A city needs people to justify its infrastructure. But people will not come without infrastructure. So the kingdom must build everything first, at enormous cost, and wait. Wait for investors, wait for companies, wait for families willing to uproot their lives and move to a place that exists more vividly in marketing than in memory.
I'm on an observation platform overlooking one of the residential zones. It's late afternoon, and the heat is still brutal. Below me there are rows of foundations, concrete slabs stretching into the distance. Some have steel frames beginning to rise, others are still just holes in the ground. There are workers down there, but not as many as you'd expect for a project of this scale. The pace feels slow, deliberate, or maybe just uncertain.
The workers are mostly imported. Brought in from South Asia, North Africa, the Philippines. They live in labor camps on the city's edge, far from the luxury districts they are constructing. They work in heat that exceeds 50 degrees Celsius in summer. They are building waterfronts for people who will never know their names. They are the foundation of the megacity, invisible in every rendering. The towers they build are designed to attract a different population. The global wealthy, the corporate executives, the entrepreneurs and financiers who are being told that this city will become the new hub of the region, that it will rival Dubai, that it will eclipse Singapore, that it will offer tax incentives, residency permits, legal frameworks tailored to capital, and a lifestyle that blends Arabian identity with Western convenience. But cities are not algorithms. You cannot simply input capital and extract civilization. Cities need culture. They need accidents. They need history, grit, contradiction, and life that emerges without permission. And that is what no one can predict. Whether this megacity will hum with organic energy, or whether it will remain a pristine, hollow monument to ambition.
I'm walking down what's meant to become a main boulevard. It's wide, beautifully paved. There are streetlights already installed, modern and sleek. But there are no shops, no cafes, no residents, just a road cutting through empty lots, waiting for a future that hasn't arrived. It's strangely quiet. You can hear the wind, you can hear construction in the distance. But there's no urban sound.
The financial pressure is immense. The kingdom's sovereign wealth fund is financing much of the construction. But sovereign wealth is not infinite. The fund must also support other mega projects, other diversification strategies, and the ongoing costs of governance in a nation still heavily dependent on oil revenue. If oil prices fall, the budget tightens. If global investment slows, the timeline stretches. If confidence wavers, capital flows elsewhere. And there is competition. Other cities in the region are also building, also diversifying, also offering incentives and residency and infrastructure. The megacity is not competing against nothing. It is competing against established cities with decades of momentum, against rivals with equal ambition and deeper networks, and against the fundamental question every investor and resident will ask: why here?
I'm inside a newly completed office tower now. It's striking, floor-to-ceiling glass, marble lobby, smart elevators. But the directory board is almost empty. A few companies have leased space, consulting firms, legal offices. But most of the building is still available. The leasing agent I spoke to was optimistic but cautious. He said interest is growing.
The megacity's success depends on a chain reaction. Businesses must come because talent is here. Talent must come because businesses are here. Residents must come because there is employment, education, healthcare, culture, but none of those things fully exist yet. So the kingdom is subsidizing the start, offering grants to startups, hosting conferences and expos, creating zones with special regulations, trying to engineer spontaneity. It is an expensive experiment, and if it works, it will be studied for generations as proof that state-led urbanism can succeed in the 21st century. But if it fails, if the population never materializes, if the towers remain empty and the boulevards stay silent, then this megacity will become one of the most expensive mistakes in modern economic history.
I'm at the desalination plant that will supply water to the city. It's enormous. The machinery alone stretches across several buildings. The engineers here told me it's one of the largest facilities of its kind in the world. It has to be, because the city will need millions for fountains and pools and the illusion of abundance. This single plant represents billions in infrastructure cost, and it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Energy demand is equally extreme. The city will require multiple power stations. Solar farms are being built. Gas pipelines are being extended. The electrical grid must be robust enough to handle peak cooling loads during summer, when every building, every home, every vehicle charging station will be pulling power simultaneously. The cost of keeping a desert city comfortable is not a one-time expense. It is a permanent, recurring burden that must be justified by economic output. And that output must come from something other than construction. Because construction is a temporary economy. Right now, the megacity is employing tens of thousands of workers. But when the building slows, when the cranes come down, the city must sustain itself. It must export something: services, innovation, tourism, finance, and something valuable enough to pay for the water and the power and the maintenance of a place that nature never intended to support 2 million people.
I'm at one of the residential neighborhoods that is nearly finished. It's beautiful, honestly. Modern villas, green spaces, playgrounds, but it's almost completely empty. A few families have moved in. I saw children playing near one of the parks. But most of the infrastructure is ready. The amenity centers are open. But the community hasn't formed yet. It's waiting, like everything else here.
There is a term in urban planning: ghost city. It describes a place built in anticipation of growth that never comes. China has several, entire districts of apartments and offices constructed during boom years, now sitting vacant as populations shift and economic models change. The megacity is not a ghost city, not yet. But the risk is there. The risk that ambition outpaces demand, that supply exceeds migration, that the city becomes a symbol of excess rather than transformation. The kingdom's leadership insists this will not happen. They point to population growth, to regional instability that makes new safe havens attractive, to the global demand for livable, modern cities in emerging markets. They argue that the megacity is not just a city, but a statement, a declaration that the future will be built by those bold enough to attempt it. But statements are expensive, and the cost of this one is compounding. Every month of construction, every kilometer of road, every tower, every park, every cultural center built ahead of need, the spending continues because stopping would mean admitting doubt. And doubt is not part of the narrative.
I'm standing near the Central Transit Hub. It's designed to connect the megacity to the rest of the kingdom by high-speed rail. The station is stunning, but the trains aren't running yet. The tracks are still being laid. The schedules aren't published. It's a hub without a network, a connector waiting for something to connect.
The political stakes are as high as the financial ones. The megacity is not just an economic project. It is a legitimacy project. A way for the kingdom to prove it is modern, forward-thinking, and capable of competing on a global stage. It is a response to critics who say the nation is too dependent on oil, too slow to reform, and too isolated to attract the talent and capital needed for the next century. If the megacity succeeds, it validates the kingdom's entire diversification strategy. It proves that top-down transformation is possible, that a government can reshape its economy and its identity through sheer force of investment. But if it fails, if the city becomes a monument to miscalculation, then the political cost will be severe. It will confirm every skeptic. It will waste resources that could have been spent elsewhere. And it will cast doubt on every future mega project the kingdom proposes.
I'm back in the desert now, a few kilometers from the city center. The landscape here hasn't changed in centuries. And then, suddenly, there's construction. Fences, security, excavators tearing into the ground. The contrast is stark. And it raises a question you can't ignore. Does this belong here?
The answer depends on who you ask. The developers will tell you that all great cities were built against constraints, that Manhattan was swamp, that Singapore was jungle, that human ingenuity has always overcome geography, and they are not entirely wrong. But those cities had something this one does not. They had need. They had trade routes, harbors, resources, populations that required urban centers. This megacity has none of that. It has only will and money, and the belief that both can substitute for necessity. The cost of that belief is already north of $100 billion, and the city is not half finished. Some estimates suggest the final price could approach $500 billion when all phases are complete, when the population reaches target levels, when the airports and universities and hospitals and entertainment districts are all operational. That is more than some nations spend on infrastructure in a generation. It is a sum so vast that if the city underperforms, if it attracts only half its projected population, or a third, the financial damage will echo for decades.
I'm inside a control room now. It monitors the city's utilities in real time. Water flow, power consumption, traffic. The technology is impressive. The screens show a city that is alive. But the data is sparse. It's like watching a symphony warm up with only a few instruments. The infrastructure is ready, but the performance hasn't begun.